All right. Spring practice has officially begun. This weekend's the first full week of spring practice around a lot of where college football is at this current moment in time. Welcome on in, ladies and gentlemen, to Inside the Huddle. I'm your host, as always, Lucas Hill. Thank you all for joining a wonderful, wonderful Friday evening, wherever you are, whether you're watching us on X, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Instagram Live as well. Thank you all for once again hopping on Inside with us on Inside the Huddle. All right, we have a lot to talk about. We've got TikTok dances that are being banned. We've got spring practice continuing to affect around the game of college football. We've got a lot of questions to ask about spring practice, and we've got a lot of NFL draft covers that we need to discuss. So, with that being said, before we get started any further, everybody do us a favor. All right? I want you to do me a favor. Make sure wherever you're watching us, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure that you like, you share, and subscribe. Turn on that bell notification so that you are notified every time that we post a new video. We post pretty regularly. If you're watching us on Instagram, give us a follow at Lucas_Hill_17. By the way, guys, want to shout out our good friends over at the Houston Roughnecks podcast, the Rough 'em Up pod. They shared myself and our good friend, we had a conversation the other day talking Houston Roughnecks football with our good friend Cullen Watkins with the Rough 'em Up podcast. We had a lot of fun discussing all of that and more. Guys, 2 weeks away from Friday Night Lights Out in Houston. Really excited to get on out to H-Town to talk to interact with some of you. I know some of you have reached out to me saying that you were excited to be a part of that. Really excited to get to see many of you guys as we get closer and closer to March 28th. Only 2 weeks away, guys. I am super, super excited for this. I cannot wait to see you guys there. Continuing on, guys. If you're watching us on X, that's basically our moneymaker right there. Give us a follow at Lucas_Hill23. Also join Scout as well at Southern Charm SP. Guys, a lot to talk about. So let's kind of get diving into it. So ESPN came out earlier today or last week and talked about the biggest questions going into spring practice in the top 25. And we're going to go down one by one, and we're going to talk about this. So let's start off with Ole Miss. They say, will Lane Kiffin's portal pickups pay off? So you talk about a portal king and what you were able to get. Look at what you had last year. You brought in Trey Amos. You brought in Princely Umanmielen. You brought in Walter Nolan. Well, now all three are gone, which doesn't help you. Amos came from Alabama and ULL. Princely Umanmielen. Oh, obviously everybody knows about Walter Nolan coming from Texas A&M. All likelihood he could become a first-round draft pick this upcoming draft in about a month. And you obviously know about Walter Nolan transferring in from Texas A&M and Princely Umanmielen transferring in from Florida. You bring back Suntarine Perkins. Xavier Harris is coming back. I think Perkins is going to have another outstanding year. I think that this could be a year where he could emerge as a first-round draft pick. I think he has a lot to look forward to as well. Obviously, Xavier Harris has experienced a lot, having gone through the legal battles off the field. Now he's back better. I think once he's gotten past that, he is able to focus on football now. He has an opportunity to also be a first-round draft pick. He's been a stud on special teams. let me just tell you, he can make a difference at times. Guys, he is a really, really good ball player. Has a really good get off. He can make a difference in the middle of a defense. And I think he will have that breakout season that you've been looking forward to. I'm not saying he's going to be Princely or he's going to be Walter Nolan, but he has that ability to break out in certain situations. He had a block. He had a great game in the Gator Bowl against Duke. Really dominated. Doesn't matter that he played against a backup Ole Miss, or he played against basically a backup Duke team. You know what I mean? He had a great game. And I'll tell you what, I'm really excited for what he's going to bring to the table in the future. Guys, nobody is going to talk about what he's going to bring to the table. But let me tell you what, if he can get back on the field, he is going to be a star in the making that people really need to pay attention to. Guys, he's going to start every game this year. I hope you're ready for that. And look, I promise you, you get him on the field, he's going to have a huge season in 2025. Guarantee you, it's going to happen from a guy like that. All right, let's talk about number 20. All right, let's talk about some of the guys they got from the portal. So, you brought in Prince Will, Uman Milan, whatever his name is. So you got in the younger brother from Nebraska. You brought in Deshaun Womack, which, by the way, if you guys don't know about Deshaun Womack, I promise you, the kid has had a lot of potential. He just could not crack the starting lineup. You know, I thought he could have been starting last year or in 2023 as a freshman. There's a reason why he was at one point the number 1 overall player in the state of Maryland. Hell, he could have, he was, I think, the number 5 overall player at his position. The kid has a lot to look forward to. And it sucks that he didn't get a lot of playing time in his 2 years in Baton Rouge, because I think the kid had a lot to look forward to. I mean, 23, I could have sworn he would have been playing more than what he did in this year. I think that he will eventually crack the starting lineup at Ole Miss. I think you need to use him a lot in pass rush. The kid is incredible off the edge. And I have a lot of respect for what his game is. It's really impressive. You brought in Jaden Ray. You brought in a lot of SEC guys. You got in Antonio Kite from Auburn. You brought in Sage Ryan, who I knew he was going to transfer at the end of the year. I talked to our good friend Blake Ruffino near the end of the season, and we talked about Sage, and we said that he could very well transfer near the end of the year, and he ended up doing so. Jalen Braxton, Kapena, and Gunchkin. You look at the receiver room, it's impressive. You brought in Harrison Wallace from Penn State. I love the pickup there. You brought in Dejon Stribling, who I think was in a pretty bad situation with Oklahoma State. Just knowing that quarterback-wise, it wasn't a lot of fun. But you're talking about 2 guys that combined almost 100 catches and average combined 16 yards a catch. So you're talking about 2 guys that are very capable at their respective positions. Luke Hasz is another guy that you need to look out for. We've been high on him all season long. I think a fully healthy Hasz is going to make a big difference. And I think when you get him in the right system, I think when you get him in the Kiffin system, he's going to become a great fill-in for a guy that's leaving like Caden Prescorn. Austin Simmons is going to have a lot of guys surrounding him. The offensive line is going to be really fine. With Patrick Kutas coming in from Arkansas, Delano Townsend who's a highly touted offensive lineman from UAB. I think they're going to be just fine. Ole Miss has a lot to look forward to. Let me just tell you that. Do I know what's going to happen when it comes to the run game? It's one where there's a lot of question marks. I'll just say that. Jordan Watkins comes back. I think he'll be primarily either your slot guy. He'll probably end up being there. And I think you're going to put Stribling and Harrison at X and the Y just because of their size as well as their speed. But you got to think that all three guys are able to break out at any given moment. All right, let's talk about number 24, and that's Boise State. Everybody knows, how do you replace Ashton Jeanty's production? There's no easy way that you can do something like that. There just isn't. How do you replace arguably one of the greatest players, probably the greatest player in the history of Boise State football? There's no way you can do that. I'm telling you. But I'll say this. You bring in Jamboree's Dunbar, Sire Gaines. Maddox Madsen is going to be relied upon more heavily. He's going to get involved more in the passing game. You have to. And look, Madsen has proven himself as a capable passer. He has the opportunity to really break out in these types of situations. And whether you like it or not, this is a guy that has a really strong arm. We've seen him take over games when Jeanty wasn't at 100%. We saw it during the UNLV game. We saw it during the Penn State game. He can sling the rock, but the problem is, who are you going to have at running back? Well, there's no one guy that is going to be your feature back. Everybody knows about Jamboree's Dunbar as well as Sire Gaines, both guys that didn't even get scrap for carries last year, when obviously so, when you have arguably the greatest running back to come through college football in the last 5 years, maybe. But again, what do? You obviously got to go to Maddox Madsen. You got to go to your quarterback. How does it look? We'll just have to see. Number 23, Miami. How does the revamped defense look? So you got Corey Heatherman. You fire Lance Gendry. Heatherman has been a top-tier defensive coordinator over the last year or two, actually ever since he was with Kurt Signetti at JMU. And look, he's been a really, really fun guy to watch. I really have enjoyed what he has brought to the table as the defensive coordinator. I love what he did with PJ Fleck last year, even though the offense kind of let them off the hook a little bit. This is a defense that I think is going to be very proud going into 2025. I think they're going to improve. You've obviously gotten guys like Ethan O'Connor, Zachariah Poyser, and Charles Brantley. And you're talking about a guy in Brantley that's a 3-year starter to go along with a guy like Emmanuel Carnley, who's going to help add depth. You've had a lot of coaching staff changes. You've had Damian Lewis to lead your defensive tackles. That should be much better. How does your offense look, too, with a guy like Carson Beck? And not to mention that you're losing the bulk of your offense. But like I mentioned yesterday, majority of your running backs are going to be fine. You bring back two guys that combined had over 1,000 yards rushing. Both averaged almost 6 yards a carry, despite losing a guy like Damian Martinez. Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle are two very young guys. Both of them are going to be entering their, I think, or sophomore and junior years, respectively. I think they can be really productive at the running back position. I think you can use them in a variety of different ways, but the biggest question obviously has to surround Miami's defense because you just don't know what they're going to look like. If they can be mid-tier, I think they can still be a contender in the ACC, but again, we just don't know what to expect. Let's talk about Texas A&M. So what does the Colin Klein offense look like? So Connor Wigman's gone. The offensive line that struggled the last several years but improved. Can you get a consistent quarterback? Ruben Owens is back. Le'Veon Moss, I think, is gone. Don't quote me on it though. It sucks. No, he's back. Le'Veon Moss is coming back. It's big. Let me just tell you. And the running back room is going to be the strength of where Texas A&M is going to be. Obviously, with Le'Veon Moss, Ruben Owens, who missed all of 2024, but showed out, had some good moments in the Las Vegas Bowl against USC. 13 carries for 56 and an 11-yard carry. You know, losing a guy like Le'Veon Moss sucked near the end of the year. And coming from somebody that played against him, you can't afford to lose him. You just can't afford to lose a kid like that. He's the third down back. Let me just tell you. The kid is an unbelievable wrecking ball at running back. You bring those two back. Amari Daniels is back. The biggest blow, though, for me has to be losing Noah Thomas. You lose him. He was the leading receiver for you last year, but you brought in a very, very good receiving room. You brought in Casey Concepcion, which I think a lot of people should be very high on. You brought in Jonah Wilson from Houston, and you brought in Micah Hudson from Texas Tech, who I think is back. I don't know if they are back, if he is back just yet. Some are just saying that he could return to Tech, but I'm not sure, man. I mean, there's just no future with them. But I'll talk to some insiders in the next few weeks and get back with you guys. Some say that they're in Lubbock, but we don't know, man. So we'll have to see. But if not, I will let you guys know as soon as I get word. At the tight end position, dude, it was kind of a big hit that you lost arguably your best tight end on the team. Obviously so. It's not. It didn't really hurt you that you lost a guy like Trey Watson, who I think is now. I think the new passing game. Nah, never mind. He's somewhere else now. I'm trying to find out who it was that was former tight end with Texas A&M. That's right, Donovan Green, who was at Texas A&M earlier. That's a big get for them. If we're just being real, I did not think Donovan Green would transfer. Just knowing his relationship with Colin Klein. Shoot, I don't know, man. but you also brought in Micah Riley. You brought in Nate Buckriker. I think Nyblack's going to be your guy. He's a nice. I like the fit that he looks with Colin Klein's offense. I think he can use him more of a hybrid tight end role. But again, he's got a lot that he can do. Number 21, Michigan. Is Bryce Underwood going to be ready to start right away? So you brought in Mikey King as well. I think King's a reliable backup. Bryce is going to be. You're going to have to hold him back a little bit if we're being honest. Bryce has a lot to look forward to with his future with the Wolverines. Now, part of the reason too is that you're going to have to rely on the run game. I think Mullins is back, or no, Khalil Mullins is gone. Donovan Edwards is gone. So who do you have when it comes to your running back room? Well, it's not as bad as you would say it is. So it's pretty big that you got Justice Haynes. I thought he was one of the big. I think he's going to carry a big impact when it comes to the running game. I think Haynes can be utilized in a ton of freaking ways. You put the label on him as an athlete because he is as advertised. I think he can be utilized really well in Sharon Moore's offense. I think he'll fit right on in to what Michigan has to offer. And I think he's going to do really well in this offense. I think he has a lot to look forward to. Do I think it's going to be all fun and games for him, especially with what you have in your backfield? No, absolutely not. It's going to be a struggle. But I will say this. There is a lot to look forward to with Bryce Underwood. I think he should be ready to start. He has some maturity to continue to do. But again, guys, make no mistake about this. Bryce Underwood is as advertised. And there's no doubt in my mind why he shouldn't be QB1 by the time we get to the beginning of the season. All right. Number 20, they have Louisville. The Cards last year, you're talking about a team that I thought had one of, if not the best, probably a top 3 offense in all of the ACC. But your defense screwed you a lot last year. And I think that's been kind of the overall, shall we say, mantra of what Jeff Brom's legacy has been so far, which has been your defense has let you down a lot. It let you down 2 years ago against Kentucky and Pitt, and it let you down in the Holiday Bowl against USC. Now in 24, you did it again. Your secondary burned you against Stanford, against Miami, against SMU, even against Notre Dame without a decent throwing quarterback. And even in close games like Washington in the Sun Bowl, your secondary burned you. So what did you end up doing? Well, you still have your defensive coordinator in Ron English, which, look, I have a lot of respect for Ron English. I understand why Ron English is still there, and I think it has to do with loyalty at the end of the day when it comes to Jeff Brom's situation. But you got to think about this. You have to make a coaching change if nothing changes at this year. You brought in Jabari Mack from J-State. You brought in JoJo Effins, Justin Agu, and Rodney Johnson Jr. from Southern. It's not sexy, but it's consistency that you can get. That's the biggest thing that you have to look forward to. 3/4 of your starters are out the door on the defense, along with top backup to that corner. So, are these diamonds in the rough? We'll just have to see. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll go through 19 through 1, and then we'll talk about Shedeur Sanders, and we'll get to some spring practice. All right, we'll be right back. I want to thank our good friends over at vocalbreaks.com for sponsoring this video. Stay with us.
Are you a music producer, DJ, or just someone who loves to remix tracks? Well, say goodbye to messy, low-quality track separations and hello to vocalbreaks.com, the most powerful AI-driven music editing tool on the market. Unlike other separation tools, Vocal Breaks harnesses the most advanced AI model available, delivering crystal clear vocals, pristine instrumentals, and an unmatched precision, all online with no software required. You can extract vocals or instrumentals with studio quality accuracy. It's perfect for remixes, mashups, karaoke, and music production, and for a faster, cleaner, and more reliable than any other service. So if you want the best, don't settle for less. Go on over to vocalbreaks.com and use code LucasHill10 now and experience the full future of AI-powered music editing. That's vocalbreaks.com using code LucasHill10.
All right, let's go on over to number 19, and that's Tennessee. The biggest struggle last year was the offensive inconsistencies that we saw. So what does Nico Iamaleava and the Vols receivers need to work on ahead of the fall? Well, can you put up more impressive numbers than what you did last year? So Mike Matthews is back, who initially entered the portal. So he's back. Chris Brazzell is coming back on the roster, had more than 100 receiving yards last year. But I think that there's going to be a lot more depth at the receiver position. You bring in Rodarius Jackson and Travis Smith Jr. from high school. You brought in Amari Jefferson from Alabama, Braylon Staley, who is going to be in his second year on campus. He's got an opportunity to move up the depth chart. You're talking about a guy that was a top 300 player, a top number 2 receiver in the state of South Carolina. So what can he prove in his second season in Knoxville? We'll just have to see. Nico Iamaleava, by the way. But I wouldn't say that the receivers have issues. I would say it's the offensive line that you have to address too. You're going to lose a lot of key aspects on that offensive line. Guys, you have to have a lot more better production on the offensive line. And if you don't get that, you're going to be screwed. Lance Hurd didn't play that great last year. I am challenging Lance Hurd right now. Prove me wrong. I have been sticking up for you ever since you came out of high school at U-High. I've been very high on you. Prove me wrong, because I wasn't impressed with you last year, bro. Either you move to guard or you end up getting better with your footwork at tackle, and you end up being a staple. If you do, great. If you don't, there's nothing else I can do for you, dude. Let's talk about number 18. That's Florida, which I'm kind of shocked that they're this high. I don't know if I have them this high. I would say lower 20s. I'm still up in the air about it, to be honest with you. So can they convert its late season surge into a contention among the upper half of the SEC in 25? So the good news is you saved your job. 4 big victories over LSU and Ole Miss, including over LSU and Ole Miss, including the bowl game win. Thank you, DJ Lagway. So you bring back Jaden Ball, who had a breakout 2024 season as a freshman. Not only that, but you have a young D. You have a very experienced offensive line. But what about your defense? You're going to lose Shamar James, who we saw at the Senior Bowl. Jaquezi Bridges and Jack Pybram both are gone. So Vinny Sunseri comes in as a co-op defensive coordinator as well to go along with Ron Roberts. What are we going to see from him at this point in time? I don't know, man. Obviously, you're losing Elijah Badger. You're losing Chimeri DK. So, can you get output from Eugene Wilson, who's returning from hip surgery? Can Vernell Brown pop off? Can Dallas Wilson, the 5-star, pop off? What about Nashawn Montgomery? That's one of the biggest questions that they have. And by the way, you still have the second toughest schedule in 2025. And guess what? It's the exact same as last year, except just flip-flop from where you're playing at home and away. Excuse me. I think there's a few other matchups there that's sprinkled in between, but regardless. You play Long Island, you play South Florida, at LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, at Texas A&M, Georgia at home, at Ole Miss, and Tennessee and Florida State at home. That's who you have going into this year. Can you continue to improve? 17, Indiana. How can they improve its line of scrimmage play? Well, the biggest thing is that you lose a good bit of your defensive line. But you brought in from Pat Coogan, who was a starter for Notre Dame, to go along with Zim McClaskey and Khalil Benson from Colorado. The offensive and defensive line is going to have to replace Mike Caddick and CJ West. By the way, Carpenter from Indiana as well, which I think he's gone. James Carpenter, yes. I think he's gone. So he was a semifinalist for the Burlsworth Award, by the way. And, dude, James Carpenter was a dog last year. Maybe you don't really remember him, but he was an absolute monster for that team. So I think he ended up with, 18 tackles, 19 total, or 37 total tackles, 5 sacks to go along with 10.5 TFLs. So that was pretty big for him. So what do you have to look forward to? Well, Fernando Mendoza comes to town as your new quarterback. So, look, I'm not expecting you to put out eye-popping numbers this year. If you go 8-4, 9-3, it's consistency. But you're talking about Indiana, by the way. I'm not expecting you to make the playoff year after year after year. Trust me, I'm not. If I was, it'd be ludicrous. But I look at the schedule still. It's a bit tougher than it was last year. Here's your key games. At home against Illinois, I think that's going to be a big one. At Oregon, I don't know if you're winning that. At Penn State, home against Wisconsin, I guess, is really the only ones I would say is a tough matchup. But other than that, I really wouldn't consider anything else a big issue. But I think this is still a roster that goes 8-4, 9-3 this year. And I think could contend for a playoff if they end up winning 10 games in the regular season. So we'll have to see. 16th, Kansas State. The offensive line, how did they keep steady following a lot of change? So they lost 4 or 5 starters and still gave up the 10th fewest sacks nationally at 1 per game. They were also 11th in rush defense at 215.5 yards per game. So you lose Coach Connor Riley to the Dallas Cowboys. Both of your tackles are gone to graduation and the portal. But you did add George Fitzpatrick and Brandon Schnett of Wagner and guard Amos Talele of USC. So obviously you're bringing back Dylan Edwards and Napier Johnson. So if you don't remember Dylan Edwards, that was the guy who ran for almost 200 yards in the bowl game against Rutgers. The guy has a lot of talent. And look, I think he's obviously going to be the feature back next year. I think there should be a high ceiling. Many people had Avery Johnson winning the Heisman Trophy last year. He was a dark horse, kind of, but I do think that he is going to have a lot to look forward to in 2025. But the offensive line should not lose a step. I think you'd still be a top 25 offensive line at the end of the year. And I think that this Kansas State team is still going to be in Big 12 contention. 15th SMU. Who is going to be Kevin Jennings' primary passing target last year? You're losing Brashard Smith. You're losing 3 of your top 4 receivers. But you also bring in a lot of talent. RJ Maryland's returning from injury. Recruiting-wise, it looks interesting. Jalen Cooper and Dalen Singleton, both blue chips, both gritty recruits. I think both are from around the Texas area that didn't get a whole lot of attention. Both are 4 stars, by the way. You brought in Romello Brinson and LJ Johnson Jr. Romello Brinson is going to make a big impact. I think that once you get them into their stride offensively, that's when you're going to start to see them take off. And I think it starts with Romello Brinson being really the foundation of that passing game. 14th, they have Arizona State. So, obviously, no Cam Scatterboo anymore. Where does the offensive production come from? That's easy. It comes from Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt is going to have arguably one of the best passing attacks that he's going to have this year. If you're going to be concerned about Arizona State this year, you should. Jordan Tyson is back for his second year. Jordan Tyson is one of the best backs in college football as a receiver. And I think that there's a lot to look forward to. Last year's Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year and a first-team All-Big 12. It's his redshirt sophomore year. Second full season as a Sun Devil. You also talk about Kyson Brown, who showed flashes last year that he can be a dangerous player. But it all starts with number 10 and Sam Leavitt. And I think Sam Leavitt's going to have a very, very productive 2025 season. It would not surprise me if he's the number 1 quarterback in the Big 12 at the end of the year. In fact, I have him as my number 1 quarterback in the preseason. So, what all is going to change at the end of the year for Sam Leavitt and company? It's going to start with the passing game. It's going to open up a lot more, and I think Sam Leavitt's going to have a breakout 2025 season for Arizona State. It wouldn't surprise me if he's a top 5 quarterback going into next year's draft class. 13th, is Illinois. Luke Altmaier, what are your primary passing targets going into this fall? Pat Bryant's gone. Zachary Franklin's gone. But you bring back Hank Beatty and Colin Dixon. You brought in Hudson Clement, who has a lot of potential. Hudson Clement was a very, very dangerous receiver last year for West Virginia. Justin Bowick, speed is the name of his game. He is a very, very dangerous receiver. So Barry Looney Jr. is a very underrated offensive coordinator in the Big Ten. It would not surprise me if Luke Altmaier ended up being a top 3 quarterback in the nation. And I definitely see where he can put that in. And I think he has a lot to look forward to. And I think that he can really improve his game as the season goes on. I think that he has a really, really good shot to be one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of college football. Illinois' defense is going to be really good again this year. There's no question in my mind that the defensive line is going to be the strength of this team, and I think it's going to lead them yet again to another 10-win season. Number 12, Alabama. Who is going to step up at running back? Like we mentioned, you lose Justice Haynes. Jalen Milroe is gone. So where does Jam Miller come into play? Jam Miller, I have said this since the middle of the season. You have to get Jam Miller involved in this Ryan Grubb offense. You have to make sure that he is the primary running back in this offense. He is a very, very elusive back. He is a do-it-all back. I think he carries a lot of what Justice Haynes did last year, but I think he can do more than what he was able to do. If you give him the carries, he can really make a difference as a running back. 5'10", 218 pounds. I think he's a bowling ball as a running back. You got to get him out into the passing game, though. That's where he's going to make his mark, and I think that's where he deserves to make his mark. Absolutely what he's going to do. So make no mistake, guys. This is a very, very pivotal year for Alabama. You have to be thinking, if you're a Bama fan, if we don't make the college football playoff this year, how long are we going to accept this from Ryan Grubb, from Kalen DeBoer, knowing how expectations and how things have changed around college football over the last 2 or 3 years? So we'll just have to see with that one. Number 11, Iowa State. You lose Jaden Higgins. You lose Jalen Noel. How do you help a guy like Rocco Becht, who was one of the top 3 best quarterbacks in the Big 12 last year? I think he's number 2 on my list. So you brought in Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend. It's hard. I don't think it's going to be like it was last year. But again, Rocco Becht is one of the most impressive of quarterbacks that I saw last year, and he didn't get a lot of attention. There's a reason why he is a very, very underrated player. It's because of his poise in the pocket and what he brings to the table. So this is the team that had a winning record in 7 of Matt Campbell's 8 seasons. So you're talking about a guy that can turn over a roster and continue to win. 8 or 9 wins, not out of the question. I definitely think they can achieve that. And in a weak Big 12, it definitely wouldn't surprise me if they're back in the Big 12 championship. Now we're getting to the top 10. 10 is South Carolina. Can Lenora Sellers hit a new level and lift the Gamecocks to true SEC and playoff contention? I'll be honest with you. If you switch Illinois and if you switch South Carolina, I'd be fine with that. I know it sounds weird, but I do somehow see this team as a believe it or not, I do see them as just outside the top 10. I'm not saying they're a bad team, but I will say it's hard to replace a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. But I think the biggest question mark is this. I don't think it's just Lenora Sellers. You got to look at the secondary. You're losing a lot of key pieces. You lost Nikki Minwari. You're losing some corners at the edge. But I will say this. What South Carolina has been able to do with their defense has been impressive. Guys, South Carolina is a really, really solid defense. Has been having really solid defenses over the last 5 years under Clayton White. There's a reason why Clayton White is still at South Carolina. You're talking about a team that is one of the best in turnovers. And I think that's why hasn't been a whole lot of question when it comes to this Clayton White off defense. It's because of the production that you've had. It's been the inconsistency of the offense that raises a lot of questions, and rightfully so. You're losing Rocket Sanders, who's going to be who was the feature back last year. So what do you do to replace him? Well, you obviously have to start off with what Lenora Sellers can bring to you in that option game. That's where it starts off first. Recruiting-wise, you didn't get any sexy picks through the portal, but it's consistency. It's key pieces that you can plug in and you can have them play at their respective positions. I think that's where they're going to find the most success. Number 9, BYU. Wow. BYU that deep? Jake Retzlaff coming back. Best defense in the country. Solid group. Thing about it is, can you be consistent and do you have the depth to make a run like you did last year? We'll see, man. I mean, they have a stretch where they play Utah, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech. That, to me, is a decent little 3-game stretch. Hell, I'll even put at Colorado, West Virginia, and Arizona in there. And I would say that's a key 6-game stretch that you have to play. If you can go 4-2 or 5-1 throughout that period, I think that's a win. That's a huge victory for BYU and what they can produce. Look at what they did last year against Shedeur. I know it was a cupcake kind of game, but you put consistent pressure on Shedeur Sanders and you made him, and you forced turnovers. That was the biggest thing that really helped your defense out last year. And you're going to need that a lot going into this year. Number 8, LSU. What changes has LSU made at the offensive line? So I talked to a couple of insiders about this, and yesterday that when they had spring practice, they had DJ Chester moving at center, but I think they're going to have Braylon Moore at center. So we'll have to see with that one. Everybody knows you're losing Will Campbell and Emory Jones. DJ Chester will probably end up switching to another position at guard. Tyree Adams got some experience at left tackle. He'll be a pretty interesting class that is going to be pretty key. Josh Thompson was a big get. Dude, Josh Thompson is a huge get. I think he can play right guard. I think Braylon Moore will end up being your center. I think you're going to put DJ Chester at the other guard. So Tyree Adams will play that left tackle, and I think you're going to put Weston Davis out at right tackle as well. So the biggest concern is the tackle position with those 2 young guys out there. But we'll just have to see. I think Josh Thompson could move out there to tackle as well and kind of provide some depth. But again, we'll just have to see. Number 7, Clemson. How does the running back room sit and shape up? You're losing Phil Maffa. That's a huge loss. You're losing Jay Haynes, who's remaining out indefinitely after he blew his knee out in the ACC title game. That's a huge loss. So now in comes Keith Adams Jr. So now you're bringing out Adam Randall, who last year was a receiver, 16 catches, 155, 2 scores. You're trying him out at running back. Did some contributions during the loss to Texas. You're also bringing in Gideon Davidson, who was the player of the year in the state of Virginia. And you also are going to have to look at Jarvis Green and David Izamune. But let's talk about Clemson for a brief moment, because they've done something that they have never done ever since the portal opened up. And I think it needs to be discussed. And I've been meaning to discuss this quite a bit on the show today. Well, not just today. I'm talking about in general. Because when you look at Clemson, you're not looking at what they've done in the portal. You would say, oh, well, it's just Clemson. We shouldn't be really worried about them. They don't do anything in the portal. Guys, look at what Clemson did in 2025. Guys, Clemson went out and actually did something in the portal. Can you believe it? Guys, first time in recent years, ever since the portal opened up in 2019, you've just gotten 2 guys. Both of them were backup quarterbacks. This year, you brought in Tristan Smith from Southeast Missouri State. Tristan Smith is a very quick receiver. 12 yards a catch. 76 for 934 and 6 touchdowns. Can break out and is a consistent playmaker. He's going to be probably your X. I think you can plug him in and he'll be an automatic starter. I promise you that. You brought in also Jeremiah Alexander, the former 5-star edge rusher from Alabama. And I think he can really make a difference as one of your primary backers. Look, Tom Allen has gotten in his face during off-season training ever since you've been in there. It's been awesome seeing it. And then you bring in Will Helt through the portal as well, the young sophomore. So overall, where has Clemson gone? I think you're finally adapting. I know it's only 3 players through the portal, but my God, you're finally starting to get it. You're finally starting to build your roster through the portal. You're finally going to develop through the portal. And you've got 3 solid dudes that, look, you're not out there getting 10, 15 portal guys. You got 3 guys that you can plug in and play, all of which are going to be key to that roster. And I think is going to make a big impact in 2025, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Number 6, Oregon. Can Dante Moore begin to live up the success of the previous 2 quarterbacks? First it was Bo Nix, then it was Dylan Gabriel. I think you're still going to see a bit of struggle. But how do you utilize and build that offense around him? That's the only thing that I have concerned about when the Dante Moore. I love his pocket awareness, and I love the intangibles that he brings. But how do you build it around him? Number 5, Georgia. How do you develop at the receiver position? Noah Thomas, Zachariah Branch, Colby Young is going to be back. Dylan Bell, you got to have him reach his full potential. We'll just have to see, man. 36 drop passes cannot be acceptable. It's a show me year for Mike Bobo. If you don't see any more production from Gunnar Stockton and from this receiving core, you can kiss his butt goodbye. Number 4, Notre Dame. CJ Carr, this is his year. They say who will start at quarterback for the Fighting Irish. I think it's no comparison. There is no way that CJ Carr is not the starter going into 2025. Now, I know people will say, well, what about Steve Angeli, who has the most experience out of the 2? And I think one of the biggest reasons why is what you have been able to do and see the production of this offense. I think Mike Denbrock with CJ Carr is going to have a lot of production. But again, we'll see. Jim Knowles and number 3, Penn State takes center stage because how do they fare in their first year at Penn State? Because dude, you've had great transitions from many different defensive coordinators, from going from Brett Pry, going from Manny Diaz, going to Ty Allen. Now you go to Jim Knowles. By the way, yes, you're losing Abdul Carter. Yes, you're losing Jalen Reed. But you bring in Danny Dennis Sutton, who I've said is a first-round draft pick, Dom DeLucia, and Zaki Waitley, who's going to elevate himself as a key starter at safety. I think it's definitely going to be a very productive year for Penn State. Offensively, can your core 3 develop? Can you be able to be consistent on a consistent basis? But yeah, man, I mean, we'll just have to see from there. Number 2, Texas. How are the defensive tackles going to be able to fill the shoes of former players? Alfred Collins is gone. Vernon Broughton's gone. Byron Murphy's gone. Devondre Sweat's gone. Now you bring in a brand new defensive line. Your edge rushers are fine. Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, Ethan Burke are going to be fine. Anthony Hill Jr. is going to roam free as a backer. First-round talent all across the board. The biggest thing is defensive tackle. How do you improve in there? And number one, Ohio State. Who's going to win the starting quarterback position? I think it's no doubt in my mind Julian Saint's going to be the guy. Everybody will say, oh, well, Tavian St. Clair, who's a top 10 class and player. Tavian St. Clair is probably going to end up redshirting this year. I think you're going to bring, it would be smart to bring in another transfer quarterback to just be more of a backup, just be there, support, and help really read the offense. That's my opinion, but if you, at the end of the day, it's all up to Ohio State at the end of the year. Shedeur Sanders, let me just talk to you about this very briefly before we get out of here in the last 5 minutes of our show. So it wasn't too long ago, back in January, many people had him as the number one player in this year's draft class, and rightfully so. But ever since then, he's been slipping. And I've seen a lot of mock drafts that have kind of shocked me. So overall, you'd see around 2 to 3. That's the overall range. Then I start seeing, man, he might go to the Jets at 5 or at 6 or 7. Man, he might go to LA. Maybe he might drop completely out of the top 10, not even in the top 20. And it sucks to say this, but I think when we get real about Shedeur Sanders, I think there's a reason why they have that much concern about him, because of what's going on in free agency. The Raiders just signed Geno Smith. My thing is, are they going to want to waste a top 10 pick in getting a quarterback instead of building around Geno? Instead of getting another free agent quarterback for a discounted price than paying for a first-round quarterback who's going to want a lot of money. What about the Jets? They just signed Justin Fields. Do you go get him at a discounted price late in the first round? That's my only concern when it comes to this, because make no mistake about it, I am not hating on Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders is one of the most talented quarterbacks that has come through the NFL draft cycle in a long time. Do I understand that he has the dad label on his back? Yes, I am aware. I do not care. I do not care that he is Deion Sanders' son. Let me tell you, 6'1", 212 pounds. Most of them compare him to Geno Smith, by the way, guys. Which I think is kind of crazy, which I would say that Geno Smith and Shedeur Sanders could be a decent fit together in Vegas. So it took Geno Smith a while to just blossom into an accurate passer with a minimal pass rush fear and a decent mobility. That's the thing with Shedeur, is that he gets outside the pocket so quick. Even when there's no pressure, he's quick to get outside the pocket. That's the only real concern about that. He holds onto the ball too long. Mobility-wise, fantastic. Trust me, it's good. The ceiling to me is probably Steve Young. That's where a lot of teams have him. The biggest issue, though, for Shedeur, like I mentioned, he holds on to the ball too long. He gets outside the pocket quick. He gives up on a play too quickly. He runs into pressure a lot. That's where a good bit of his sacks came from last year. Now, the year before, you could say, okay, well, this offensive line broke down for him. We can all say that. But usually it's our own mistakes that really lead up to that. But at the end of the day, guys, I think this is a kid that can develop as a backup for his first full season until he gets the starting role the very next year, whether this specific guy retires or not. They did it with Patrick Mahomes. They've done it with many other quarterbacks. I'm not saying this is going to go exactly how Patrick Mahomes' route went, but I do see Shedeur eventually developing himself into a top tier quarterback in the next few years about how Patrick Mahomes was. Am I going to say that he's going to have Patrick Mahomes type numbers? No, absolutely not. It's going to take time for that to happen. That's why I think you get him into an offense and with a quarterback that has that sort of experience, that has the same sort of intangibles and skill set abilities as Shedeur currently, like Geno Smith with Las Vegas. I think it could be worth a first-round pick on it. But like I mentioned, do this at your own risk. That's all I'm going to say. I am not disrespecting Shedeur in any way. I'm not saying that he is a bad quarterback. That's the complete opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's a high risk, high reward situation if you're taking a quarterback to just be a backup in the first round. But again, it's not the first time this would have happened. Last year, Atlanta did it with Michael Penix with a $100 million quarterback in Kirk Cousins. And look what happened. Kirk Cousins got hurt. I think he's getting released this year, if he hasn't already. I haven't followed around the NFL that much. And Penix is the future. So it was, at the end of the day, it was a decent plan. They can either do it. One of two things can happen. Shedeur falls into the 20s and he becomes an Aaron Rodgers project where he's behind the backup, or he becomes a Mahomes slash a Mahomes type project slash Michael Penix project. We just don't know yet. So that's all I have to say about Shedeur. Guys, thank you once again for hopping on Inside the Huddle with us. We had 12 of you hop on in. Appreciate every single one of you tuning into our episodes. We're going to continue to churn out content. Guys, 2 weeks away from our official Inside the Huddle UFL tour. We are excited to head down to H-Town. Y'all have a great night. We'll see y'all on Sunday.